Today's the 7th of August, 2026, and this is going to be my stock market analysis for obviously the stock market. So let's go ahead and make this as quick as possible. Last week I was talking about how there was a very good chance that we were going to end up somewhere in this yellow area. I was not expecting us to go all the way up here, but I did say that if we made it past basically these two lines, that it would be very good, very bullish. And we did. Pretty much immediately that day we took off, or on Monday, the first day of the week, we took off and then we never came back. So there's definitely going to be some new drawings that have to get put on the chart to get an understanding of what's likely to happen this week. But things are looking pretty bullish. I am a little concerned with the RSI here because it's hitting the top. Now, usually when it hits the top, it tends to come back down, but a lot of the times it stays up for a little while too. So we're going to see. We're going to see what happens. Because see here, we're at roughly 60, like high 60s. And when we were high 60s over here, we were still down here. Like we still had all this room to the upside. So very bullish, but we definitely have a new line of resistance here. So since it's a new month and new week and everything, let me just get rid of everything. And I'm going to go ahead and put some lines on the chart here, starting at the monthly time frame. Okay, so that's monthly time frame, the big yellow ones. I'll talk about them once I get everything on there. Okay, weekly time frame is the green. Now let's go and put some on the daily time frame. And the white lines are going to be daily time frame. So these are a little bit harder to interpret just because of this movement down here. Everything was pretty fine if I stretch this out from here to this swing, and then we were going, respecting it. But then we had the breakdown, which I did talk about in my last video, basically being the breakdown from this rising wedge right here. And part of what I missed in the last video was this very apparent now bull flag or pennant, whatever you want to call it. To me, it'd be more of a pennant. But the movement from here all the way to pretty much here, and then the consolidation began, and then we had this little bit of a breakdown, and now we're here, right? So this is actually, I don't know how I even missed that. I was only looking at this section of the market. So now that I'm looking at the big upswing here as well, it makes a lot more sense as to what we had here. The only reason that it was a little bit weird was because it was more of a rising wedge instead of a full symmetrical triangle, which symmetrical triangles usually look more like that, right? And what we had was a little bit skewed more towards the upside. That's still a lot, like pretty exaggerated, but that's more of what we had instead of the symmetrical triangle. So it was definitely a hard read, but the new lines, I mean, they're still just as complicated at the daily time frame. So we're going to look a little bit more at the weekly time frame first, just to get an idea. So let me first, now that I have all the lines, take you all the way back to the monthly time frame, right? So monthly time frame, we've been forming a rising wedge. Now, typically that means we have a breakdown, but because we had a breakout above the wedge, now we're into some new territory. But the other issue is the higher up we go, the less sustainable this pattern is, right? And I always talk about RSI because with the S&P 500, the RSI is very indicative of where we're at and where we could be in the long term, especially when we are at the extremes, because the S&P 500 doesn't really tend to stay at extremes for too long. And we've been cooking red hot for a long time. Like, see, up here, it barely made it up and then it came back down, right? Here, it came back up for a little while and then it came back down, right? So it always wants to go back to the middle, the RSI, and we don't really see the RSI up here a lot. And when we do, it tends to come back down pretty significantly. So same thing for the opposite side, right? Like we don't really see it ever go to the bottom, right? This was 2008 and everybody, or at least most people, know what happened around that time frame, right? But this is like the only time it's ever reached the bottom. Other than that, this is monthly time frame, by the way. Other than that, you don't really see it reaching the bottom, right? It reverts back to the middle, right around the mean, and then it continues going up. But when it's up, that also is not good because that means some sort of downturn is coming. Now, when that might be is hard to say, but if you look at the average here, right, it's been respecting the average. And so long as it's above the yellow line, which currently it is, that's good. But as soon as we have a signal cross like this, that is not as good, right? So then if we start to see the purple line cross the yellow as the purple line is going down over the next month or two, that can change things, right, for the overall trend. But I'm doing these every week. So let's look at the weekly time frame. And this is where it starts to get interesting because This is where we broke out at the monthly time frame. Now we're sandwiched in between the weekly time frame and the monthly time frame line, right? So this is where it gets really interesting, because if we come back down to this area where the monthly time frame is, which would be 7,500 or less, roughly thereabout, 7,450. If we go a few more weeks, it's up to 7,500. But if we start closing below this, then that means the rising wedge at the monthly time frame is back in play. The only problem here is we also have a rising wedge at the weekly time frame. So right now, there's a very good chance that over the next couple of weeks, as long as we continue to stay above this green line, that we hit the green, or this yellow line down here, that we hit the green line and then start coming back down. For the S&P 500 to make it above the green line, which would pretty much be 7,800, 7,900, even 8,000 up here. And this is where I'll throw in my little indicators. So let's put this one at 7,500. And this one I'll put in at not 800, but 8,000. And I'll actually add some text so we know that's 8,000. Make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And 7,500 there. Okay. So these are also going to be lines of either support or resistance, depending on where the price action is. Right now, we have a lot of support under us, right? We have 7,500 and we have the yellow monthly time frame line. So for a little bit of time, things could continue to go up, right? Over the next week or two, things could easily go up into the 7,900s or so, right? That's very possible. But once we start getting to the green line, or to 8,000 or both, if we start doing that right around here, then that's when we have another good chance of coming back down, right? Because whenever we hit the support or resistance line, it either bounces back up or bounces back down, depending on where we're moving. So we basically have a little bit of room to the upside that's very likely to continue to play out. But if we look at the daily time frame, now zooming in even more, we have a new line of resistance, which is going to be right around here. Basically, wherever this candle couldn't close above, right? Or it couldn't get higher than that, and that's basically where it stayed. So this is the next level of resistance, right? So the play for next week on the bullish side, which is very likely, right? It's very likely that we continue going up, is we have to be in this area here, right? Which gives us a possible, let's see how much of a range that is. So it's about 2%, right? So this next week, if we go up a couple of percent, that's very possible. But as soon as we start hitting the green line, which next week would be right around 7,900, then there's a good chance that we come back down. Now, if we cannot make it past the red line right here, which I will change to a different color so it doesn't conflict with the other lines. If we do not make it above the blue line in the first couple of days, then this is likely to come back down to this line, which is about 7,600 actually, 7,590 or so. And then this would be our next level of support. So if we cannot make it, this is kind of like the critical area for next week that decides really in the first few days what's going to happen. If we cannot make it above that line, then we're likely going to come back down to this and then potentially keep going back up, right? That would be a solid retest, because when we broke out, we never retested. Usually when we have a breakout, you come and retest almost immediately or within the next few days, or candles, depending on what you're looking at, right? Weekly, monthly, daily time frame, minute time frame. And then you continue. That's a very consistent pattern that happens over and over and over again. But because we just went straight up and blasted through the resistance here, and then we didn't even start coming back down until a couple days later, there is also the chance that we come back down. So again, we are transitioning. The other thing that makes me think there's a good chance we come back down is the volume. But the volume was an issue last time, because as we were getting ready to climb, the volume was decreasing. And today, the volume's been decreasing as it's been hanging out here, which is kind of normal as well. But if we keep seeing candles going to the downside with increasing volume, that's going to solidify that move to the downside. And then we're likely going to come back down to the 7,500s. And then from there, if we start coming back up again, then there's a very good chance that we continue the bullish movement all the way up into the high 7,000s. And then at that point, again, the green line and the red line here, the 8,000 resistance, which is just that whole number that for some reason, things always tend to take a pause at whole numbers, 7,000, 7,500. Even the in between 100, 200, 300, 400, all of that, there's a lot of resistance and support depending on where you're at. So yeah, for the next week, let's see if we can break above 7,700, this line right here, 7772, right? The lucky 7 this week. But if we can't make it above that, then we're very likely going to do the retest that we should have done this last week instead of just blasting straight up. And then we'll see, because the volume is definitely decreasing, right? But it's going sideways, which also is normal, right? So once again, this week is very hard to put it on what it's likely to do. But based on the two scenarios, if it goes up or if it goes down, and I honestly, based on the weekly time frame, have a bias to the upside. I think there's a very good chance we just continue going up to roughly the high 7,000s and then we come back down. But again, if that does not happen, then there's a good chance we come back down to the 7,500s as a retest and then we continue going up, because now this is a really bullish breakout that we have, right? Usually when you have a pattern from here all the way to what we've seen, it looks like this. So you have the very quick and almost vertical rise up, and then you have the consolidation in between the little pennant or the flag like this, right? And then eventually the breakout goes and then it starts forming some other pattern. And this is where we're at. The only problem is it wasn't straight up all the way, because it never is straight up all the way, right? There was a little bit of a pause, and that's kind of where we're at right there. So you tell me, right? Because even if you zoom into this is another pattern that is similar to this pattern, right? Like if you look at this pattern right here, you basically have the same thing, but it's just much smaller, right? If I were to look at it on a 4-hour time frame, you'll see immediately recognize it, right? Huge move up, and then we're consolidating, right? And so very good chance. That's why I say there's a very good chance we go up here, but also because we have that little bit more wiggle room until we get up here. And once we get up to the 7,900s, then there's going to be huge resistance. Like I don't dare say the G word, guaranteed, but it's all but guaranteed that when we get up here, we're going to have some sort of a rejection, because that always happens. If I look at 7,000, let's go back and see what happened at 7,000. So first, let me throw a line on there before I even look at it, just to say this is going to be our line. And we're going to see how much resistance, how it struggled to get past 7,000, right? So I'm going to call it 7,000 and I'm going to make it orange. And let's see if I can make it really thick. Let's see. Okay, so I actually made the text orange. Oops. I meant let's make the line orange. Okay, so now we go back to wherever the price action was, whenever that was, at 7,000. And well, shoot, I was wrong. Oh, wait, nope, there it is. Look at that, 7,000. Okay, this was the breakout when it actually, like, we're going past 7,000. But look, right here, 7,000, right? It tried over here. It got close, 69.17, and then it failed. And then it tried to come back up again, 6,900, and it failed. 69.34, it failed. 69.81, it failed. 69.77, 69.94, like look at all these tops, right? And that is very likely what we have potentially coming, right? When we get to 8,000, very good chance that we have a few attempts at breaking through. So this kind of further confirms my bias towards the upside, because we are just breaking out of this pattern, right? This is the breakout. And in the zoomed in timeline, we have the same thing, right? We have another bull pennant or bear or bull flag. They both kind of look the same, but here, let me just show you what the difference is, right? So bull pennant it's got a triangle, right? Everything is consolidating within a triangle. Like this is where the stock is moving, right? And a bull flag moves up like this, except it's in a channel, right? So you can very evenly see the channel, and whereas this one is getting smaller and smaller, the consolidation, the price action, everything's converging at some place, and then boom, it explodes. This one is just a channel. It's the same. It's parallel, right? Two similarly spaced lines, or two lines with the same space throughout, and the price action is just moving up and down through there. So that's kind of where we're at. And basically next week, I'm expecting a pretty good chance for another up week. But if we go down, then we're still going to be looking at high 7,500s as a good level of support. And this other white line here could also be support, right? So if it takes a while, let's say it takes 2 weeks, then it could very likely start riding this white line on the way down, right? So it doesn't completely just go down. It could go down like this, and then maybe it starts coming back up. So we'll see. But very good chance based on weekly time frame and what's been going on. The only thing, my only concern really is the volume, even at the 4-hour time frame, you can see here. But that is also typical of consolidation, right? When you have a big move, you have big volume, and then it's slowing down as it's consolidating, getting into another pattern, ready for the breakout, and then boom, big volume. So that's where we're at. Hopefully next week we have an increase. We'll see how correct or how wrong I was. Let's go over to Bitcoin real quick. But before we do that, if you have learned anything or gotten anything out of the video, be sure to hit the like button. It's free, but you should hit the like button as a way to thank me. So let's go over to Bitcoin real quick and take a look. And with Bitcoin, basically, I was actually pretty bearish. But the interesting thing about Bitcoin is it is really holding on to whatever the hell it's doing here. I still am bearish on Bitcoin. And like I said last week, it's still hanging out in the middle here. And whenever the RSI is in the middle, it's like getting ready to move. Because even though it wants to be in the middle, it's always going away from the middle and then like aggressively coming back down or aggressively taking off from the middle. It always tends to come back to the middle and then stay there for a little bit and then boom, it goes somewhere. But monthly time frame, weekly time frame, it's looking bearish to me, right? Some people are saying that this is the bottom, but we'll see, because at the monthly time frame we have a huge cup and handle forming, right? Which, if you look, the handle would be this little part right here, right? And sure, we could go up, we could definitely go up, but look, even though this is just a drawing to illustrate what an inverse cup and handle looks like, the handle could only take us to like 73,000, right? We're at like what, 64? So that's not even $10,000 more, and we're already at the handle. And it could take a while because this is the monthly time frame to get there, but also because it's the monthly time frame, we could have a correction easily, right? Like it doesn't have to go straight up, right? We could have a correction back down to the 50s, right? This month we come back down to the 50s, and then we go back up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and then boom, right? I really do believe that Bitcoin like is showing signs of another huge move to the downside, and I'm talking like 50%, because this is kind of what we're, okay, 40%, right? Very, very real possibility of that. So that's the monthly time frame. Let's look at weekly time frame, where once again we have an inverse cup and handle, as I mentioned in the last week's video. And here the handle is getting a little bit longer. And as I said, look, up, down, up, down. It's not really doing anything. It is going up, which again is typical of the cup and handle, because usually it would look like this, right? Except here, it's not as good of a cup and handle because it went way up here, but it still qualifies to me as a cup and handle. And so you have your cup and then your handle forming, and normally you would expect it to go up after the breakout here, or the breakout would go this way, right? But who knows, right? I mean, to me, it's looking bearish at the monthly time frame, at the weekly time frame, and even at the daily time frame. If you analyze it like this, right? Because here, okay, so this is actually kind of like what I call a chart tai chi, right? Like it's going from one movement to another very smoothly, and it's hard to kind of understand what exactly it's doing. But from here to here, we had a rising wedge, which you can see in the white lines, right? Very clear, at least to me, rising wedge. It's going, it's pinching, getting smaller, right? And in case you can't see the lines I'm talking about, that's what I'm talking about right there, the white lines, right? So we get rid of that. And then we had our breakdown, right? So there's the breakdown. And then here we're starting to go up, or it looks like it. But also, what does that look like? A bear flag, right? Because a bear flag usually goes down, and it's like the bull pennant or bull flag, except it's bearish, right? So a bear flag would be consolidating in this area here, and then eventually the breakdown continues, right? So that's kind of what we have here, except it hasn't been like a huge up down swing. It's just kind of been from here we went down, right, within here, and then we have our little flag forming, right? So over the next week, it's very likely that we go down, right? Very likely. But the only thing that's really saving Bitcoin, which is the same thing I mentioned last video, is the 50 moving average. It is really, really trying to stay above the 50 moving average, and the volume has been okay, I guess. Looking at daily time frame, it's been a little bit above, but it's not increasing. Like if the volume looked like this right here, That would be nice, right? Or like this, but backwards. It would be from small to big over here, or short to tall. That'd be good, right? Like that's a good volume increase or decrease, depending on how you look at it. But it's up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So again, if there's not a lot of volume, that means that the price can easily be influenced up or down because there's not a lot of people trading it. When there's a lot of volume, that means a lot of people are trading it. And whatever the move is, that is more concrete, more cemented in, because it was the sum of many, many people interacting with the price of this thing that we're looking at, right? So something that has low volume, you just cannot trust what it's doing. And this to me is medium to low volume, because especially when you look over here, I mean, look at this. This is the perfect example, right? If you had, let me first take the volume off. If you had seen something like this, it wouldn't look that bad, right? And for all you know, it could have formed some other pattern. But then if you put the volume in, and you start to see that the volume is actually increasing here over the next few days, right? Higher, higher, same, higher. And it's like way above the average, which is the orange line. That's the average line for the volume. If the volume is increasing like this, and it's that high above the average, that is telling you something serious about the amount of people that are engaged with this thing that we're looking at, right? Same here, very high volume, right? And sometimes it doesn't move a lot. Like it could be a candle like this, and it has massive volume. But it says something about what happened, right? And you can also tell when the weekends are just by looking at the volume. On the weekends, super low volume. So whatever happens with this super low volume thing doesn't really mean anything come weekday, right? Especially if you have something like this. Over the weekend, it does nothing. And then the week comes and then boom, massive volume, right? Because here, over the weekend, let's take a look at what happened, right? Here we had this big green candle and then almost like a doji, kind of like a chunky doji candle, I think it's called. I don't even remember the candle patterns, honestly, because I don't use those. But you could have thought, hey, maybe we're recovering or not, I don't know. But then when the week came by, you see these big candles and this massive volume, and that just immediately cements the move, right? So anyway, that's what I'm trying to get at with all this stuff. Even though we're going up, you got to look at the volume. And also, I like using the RSI because if the RSI was like down here, then really good chance that we have continued move to the upside. But it's not only close to the middle, but it's moving up, right? And so if the RSI continues to move up with very little moves up, then that also, when the RSI gets to the top, means we've got more room to the downside than to the upside. So once again, with Bitcoin, still looking pretty bearish to me. And the only thing really that's holding on to it or keeping it above where it's at is the 50 moving average. So we'll see what happens. But to me, Bitcoin still looks pretty bearish. And we'll see if or when really the breakdown begins. And if it does begin, then I still think the next move is likely to come down into the 50s. At the 50s, we'll have a lot of support because this is kind of where we have been many times, if I keep scrolling back, right? So we have a ton of support over here and then to the downside from there as well. But again, monthly time frame, weekly time frame, very good chance that we continue moving to the downside. So we'll see. But that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, and I'll see you next week in the next video.